Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for taking the time to view this webinar. And the goal of this webinar is to provide some guidance around phase 2. As of right now, June 17th, we are not in phase 2, we're in phase 1, but want you to be prepared for what phase 2 will look like once we get there. We have a couple of people on the call that I want to introduce that will be guiding us along and answering questions at the end. So first we have Jamie Jonk. She's the Economic Development Director for the City of Woodburn. Jesse Cuomo, the Recreation Services Manager for the City of Woodburn. John Zobrist, he's the Chamber of Commerce here in Woodburn, the Director. And then we have Susan McLaughlin, and she works for the Marion County Health Department as a supervisor, and she is part of the Health Promotion and Prevention team. So we're going to have Susan, she will go through the slides and give us the information, and then we will ask some questions at the end.
Thanks, Amanda. Hi, everyone. I am Susan McLaughlin, and today we're going to start by going through some general guidance that we have collected around what will happen as we move into phase 2. Then we'll specifically focus a little bit in on restaurant and bars, look at some of the Oregon Health Authority food codes that go along with that, and provide you at the end with some online resources. And then we do have some questions that have come in from the community that we're going to address towards the end. So that's kind of our agenda. As we start, the slide that you can see here is just some general guidance. So this is taken from the Oregon Guidance for Business as we move into phase 2. So one of the differences is we'll be able to have a few more people on our sites and in our gatherings. So maximum gathering is going to be moving to 50 people for indoor events and 100 people for outdoors. And of course, these numbers assume that within that business or within that area, that the event or whatever's happening is practicing and able to meet the guidelines out there for social distancing, wearing masks, hand washing, all of those kind of prevention messages that we want to get out there. And we'll be going over those quite a bit. So venues, restaurants and bars, indoor and outdoor entertainment facilities, and fitness-related organizations, they may have a maximum of 250 people, and it's all based on really math. We want 6 feet around folks, and so more or less that's 35 square feet per person. So within a business, if you want to know how many folks you can have in that room or in that business, length of the room by width of the room, and then divide it, and as long as you have 35 square feet per person, that's how you're going to derive that number. Again, the maximum though would be 250 for any spot, but that's better than we were doing for a while. So we also want to still continue in phase 2 to prohibit people in different parties from congregating in any areas of a facility. So this might be indoor or outdoor locations. It includes your parking lots, your restrooms, your foyers, your waiting areas. We think about this as reducing potential exposure. So wherever people might be that they might need to get closer than 6 feet together or unable because of the numbers that are there, kind of like your kitchen at the party, right? Where does everyone end up? Close together in the kitchen when you have a whole house to spread out. So that's what we're thinking here. We want to make sure that folks are not congregating in different areas of a business. We also want to configure our outdoor space to ensure that parties have no more than 10 people. When they say parties, that's groups that are eating or socializing together. Even if they are family members, we want no more than 10. And that again is just to limit those exposure potential. So when you set tables, you're not going to have those really large tabletops of 12 or 16. So limit your parties to 10 or less. Again, some of these things are continuing on from what we do, how we do business anyway, but reminding folks in the guidance to thoroughly clean all areas of the gathering space prior to reopening and between events. We're going to use disinfectants that are included in the Environmental Protection Agency approved list. There are hundreds of them, and we'll be able to provide that list to you if you need it. Restrooms should be cleaned hourly, and then we want signage up to help you. The more signs you have up reminding people, it just reinforces that people can act in an appropriate way and behave within those guidelines without all of those running around reminding folks. So post clear signs listing COVID-19 symptoms, direct your employees or your participants or your clients that have symptoms that they need to stay home, they need to not enter the event space, and then providing lists of who to contact if they need assistance is always helpful. So those are kind of the guidelines that are going to go across all businesses. And a lot of them, again, are really about preventing exposure. So what are some of those things we can do as we open up, as we become more social again, as we get out of our homes to decrease the likelihood that we're putting ourselves at risk for spreading COVID? Next slide, please, Amanda. Okay, so specifically talking about restaurants and bars, there are a few things just to consider that are different than businesses that don't have food items around. So again, you're going to ensure your tables are spaced at least 6 feet apart. And as we move into phase 2 and you are able to space tables slightly closer together, it doesn't have to be every other table anymore. Some of that can be accomplished by installing plexiglass between tables if you don't have that 6 feet of distance. And where I'm thinking that applies mostly would be to like 2 booths where they share that seat back to back. Limit parties of 10 or fewer. We talked about that a little bit already. Minimize employee bare hand contact with food through the use of utensils. So folks in restaurants who are dealing with food have an awful lot of guidelines already there. And so it's just reminding folks to be conscious about not touching things with their bare hands as much as they possibly can. And one of those things you can do is just use spoons instead of hands. Reinforce meticulous hand hygiene. This is our #1 defense against COVID, is to wash our hands thoroughly, completely, and often. Employees must wear gloves when performing cleaning, sanitizing, or disinfecting activities. So putting those gloves on is a good thing to protect your skin from those cleaning hazards. But then when you take them off, your hands inside get washed, and then you have clean hands moving forward. And of course, no bare hand contact with food is permitted if that's within your licensing requirements. Okay, makes sense, I hope. So a few more things here as we move on. We are going to be able to, in phase 2, have our establishments open a little bit later, but we want to end all on-site consumption of food and drinks, including those alcoholic beverages, by midnight. So again, that's just a couple of hours of time late in the evening where folks are not going to be exposed. So that's about limiting exposure, again, by limiting the amount of time people can be out and about. Prohibit self-service operations like buffets and salad bars and soda machines, growler refilling stations. We're still not going to allow folks to help themselves. They will have to have someone in the establishment doing that for them. Disinfect customer contact services at tables between each of your customers. Pardon me. This includes seats, tables, menus, condiment containers, and other touch points. So anything that the customers could touch, we want to limit because they will need to be cleaned between each new set of occupants in that table. So a suggestion is to provide condiments when they are asked for, not just sitting out on the table all the time, and that just will help you to save time between seatings. Prohibit counter and bar seating unless the counter faces a window or a wall, and at least 6 feet of distance is maintained between parties or staff behind the bar. So if you have counter space at your establishment, you know, this is to protect your employee as well as your customer, that they can't get close to each other. Again, remember, this is prevention, so they can't get within that 6 feet. So oftentimes that's not possible when we have counter service. Disinfect all common areas and touch points, like your payment devices, and use menus that are single-use, cleanable between customers. That could mean that they're laminated, or they're online, or they're just posted on a whiteboard. But again, your eliminating something that multiple people would be able to touch. Other reminders, and again, these come from Oregon Health Authority and they come from our food code. So restaurant and bar owners should be familiar with these things. I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to cough for a second. Hopefully we can edit that out just a little bit. Okay, so food codes. Foods that are ready to eat can spread illness. We all know that, and the more hands that are touching them and the more they're sitting around, the greater the risk for spreading illness. And that does include anything that's raw or washed and cut, like fruits and vegetables, and foods that don't require additional cooking. Food products that are subsequently fully cooked, like a pizza, are not considered ready to eat, so they can be handled with your bare hands. However, want to remember that between orders, we don't touch any other surfaces or touch our face in between. Gloves and other barriers do not replace hand washing, so again, establishing with your employees that washing their hands is that #1 way to prevent COVID and other germs from spreading. Always wash your hands before putting gloves on and when changing to a new pair. You should change your gloves as soon as they're soiled or torn, or if they've touched raw meat, fish, poultry, and none of these regulations are new to COVID. It's just more of a reminder that they still need to have those good practices in place. Never wash and reuse gloves, and remember that latex gloves should not be used by people preparing food because some people are terribly allergic to that, and those allergens can transfer onto those food sources. Sorry, it's allergy season around here. All right, additional resources. So there are many more than this, but just to briefly touch back to some of the points that we made in our slides, we have resources here to get signs for posting, to think about how to wear and use face coverings in your business. All of our guidance materials are online. And I also will remind you, since I work for the health department, that as a restaurant and bar owner, you can always call your environmental health inspectors for guidance. They are there to help you and can work through a lot of these questions and issues for you. So that's what I have to say. I hope this is a good start or refresher to help you feel more comfortable that you are ready to open your business in phase 2. And now we'll be taking some questions from the group.
I was curious with the 35 square feet per person. I could see a common question being, is that my total business square footage, or is that just my serving space, or where my patrons will be seated? Do you know if how that's defined?
Well, I haven't seen it more clearly defined than just 35 per square foot up to 250. So I would go by the dimensions of the room that you expect folks to be in.
That would make no sense. And then in addition to that, with the plexiglass being an alternative, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there's additional guidance on how what the height of plexiglass and things need to be at, correct, in the guidance for that?
I don't know specifically if there's additional directions or not. I'd have to get back to you.
Okay, perfect. I was just curious if that changed the number of people that could be within a space, or if it still had to be the 35 square feet.
It doesn't increase the number per square foot, but it may increase your ability to put people in seating within that space. Like if your restaurant's all booths, you'd need every other one if they can't be 6 feet apart, because back to back we may not be. But if there's that barrier there, then we don't have to consider that to be not social distancing.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
I have a comment on I think the spirit, and this is just from what I've read, it's 6 feet spacing for people. So I think to answer your first question, Jesse, it's within the facility, 6 foot apart. So that would be in all areas.
First question, can the virus spread through food?
Okay, I'll go ahead and take this one. I did consult with our environmental health restaurant inspectors to make sure that I was correct as I'm passing this forward. Currently, the CDC, the FDA, and the USDA are not aware of any reports of COVID-19 as a foodborne illness.
Are people from 2 different households eating together at risk? So we know we want to be 6 feet apart, but if we're at a table and we're two different households, that's not necessarily 6 feet apart. So there's been some fear around that.
Yeah, and any time that there's a group that are close together, any one of the members, whether you're a member of the same household or different households, could potentially pass that virus if one of them has it. So yes, there is risk whenever you're interacting with someone from a different household, even if you're related. So I think this question is really like, if we meet the grandparents for dinner, can we give it to them? We in our unit know that we've only been around each other. They've only been around each other, but yes, we can definitely pass between groups.
Is someone monitoring how many people I can have in my building? Is there a penalty for having more people than allowed? I think this would be directed at the city entity as well. You know, what are we doing in Woodburn to monitor, and will there be some backlash if there's more than the allotted amount of people in a space?
I can answer that from the city's perspective. I think that a lot of the requirements are relied on for the businesses to adhere to really encourage spacing, encourage their employees and the business owners to be responsible and ensure public safety, not only of themselves and their families, but their customers as well. The city is encouraging the same thing. Our city hall is not currently open to the public because we're trying to do our best to not only to provide safety to our employees, but also to the public. Much like Susan had indicated, just because you're working together related, it doesn't mean you could not be exposed or be risking another individual. That being said, the police are not going and checking out how many people are in a building at any given time. They don't have the capacity to do that, nor do they have the authority to do so. They have, however, responded on a few occasions where it's been reported to them where an event or an activity was taking place which did not meet the requirements for social distancing or having too many people in a single environment. And at that time, the individuals participating in the event were asked to shut it down for public safety requirements. However, they're not knocking on buildings and taking count.
Okay.
And I think in addition to that, Amanda, a question that I've heard that's related to the one you asked is if a community member sees a restaurant that isn't working with the practices, and how would they report that? And OSHA is the contact for any kind of reporting, and then OSHA has stated that they will then take that information and get them share that information with whatever entities they need to get that to the ground level. So if there are complaints from community members or anything like that, that is my understanding, is that it's going to go through OSHA. And feel free to correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, our restaurant inspectors can respond to complaints received at the county as well, and they would be looking for this on routine inspections. And so if we did receive a complaint, we would look into it and then possibly refer to OSHA as well.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that information. Next question, should my employees wear gloves at all times while working, even when not handling food?
The answer is really that proper glove using may help reduce the spread of virus. Currently, restaurants and mobile units, they're not required to wear gloves. If proper hand washing practices are followed and that facility can reduce their bare hand contact using utensils like we're in the guidelines, then they may not need to wear gloves. If gloves are used, an employee needs to wash their hands before and after using them and change gloves between each individual task. So where gloves are not effective is if I'm wearing gloves all day long and it's the same set and I'm touching everything here and there, then I can transfer things between meals, between people. If I'm scratching my head, I'm touching my face, then that pair of gloves is not effective. But that's why they're not required. Hand washing between things is much more effective.
Are facial coverings required in phase 2 guidance? It is still required for restaurants to restaurant employees to wear facial coverings, correct?
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay. Can groups bigger than 10 congregate together if they are in the same family but not the same house? There's been a lot of questions around these are our family members, we're related, we're a group of 15, but we all live in different homes. Is that permitted?
No, the limit of 10 is regardless of who the folks are and how they know each other. So
Okay.
even if they're all related, they need to split up into separate individual tables.
Okay. As a business owner, am I liable if my employees or customers contract COVID from my restaurant?
That's not a question that I can answer. I would think that would be a question for legal counsel. So I'll defer to the other speakers and see if they have different information.
So that is a very hotly contested or talked about subject within the Chamber of Commerce community and businesses in general. And there's a lot of desire for that to be clearly put down in law as far as protecting business owners from frivolous lawsuits based off of this. Currently, you can't sue your employer because you caught the flu while you were at work. If you can definitely prove it, that it becomes a workman's comp issue. And so, yeah, it is hotly debated, and currently that question can't definitively be answered because there are so many unknowns, but it is being worked on diligently.
Is it safer for customers to eat outside instead of inside?
I don't think either one is safer as long as people are following all the guidances. If they're sitting appropriately far apart, if they're not sharing bites of food with each other, although we know that it's not considered a foodborne illness. If you're eating and chewing and laughing, like I'm chewing gum here, there's a potential for some things coming out to hit the screen, right? So if people are real close together, that could be a risk factor. So it's really about what you're doing, not where you are. So outdoor seating, I think, is going to help restaurants be able to provide service and meals to more people because they can space them out. But as far as is indoor or outdoor safer, as long as those guidelines are being followed, it should be equal.
Am I allowed to sit people outside of my restaurant on the sidewalk?
I can talk about this one. The city does not have a ordinance against your restaurant serving your patrons on the sidewalk. There is, however, a code that requires us to have a pedestrian right-of-way along the sidewalks. Fortunately, in Woodburn, we have a nice wide sidewalk, so that helps somewhat. But there has to be a minimum of 4 feet. So you cannot put people out into the sidewalk, which is going to impact the pedestrian right-of-way or pedestrian accessibility. But you can put tables right up against your building and have people sitting outside to eat against the building. But I think that if there was any impeding the right-of-way or the walkway for the pedestrians, it would most likely require a visit from code enforcement.
A follow-up to that, Jamie, is there any additional permits that need to be received to serve outside your restaurant like that from the city's perspective?
The requirement is that in order to serve food outside of your restaurant, it has to be connected to your business in some way. You have to be either having a health-approved kitchen facility on the inside, and then you can serve food on the outside. You can't take a retail hat business and serve tacos on the outside. They don't meet any of the public health requirements, and they cannot do so. It has to be directly connected to the business that's on the inside of the building.
The other thing that I'll throw in here is that if you are extending your premises to serve alcohol, you do need to check in with OLCC about that.
Okay,
Well,
great point.
that being said, you can't serve alcohol in the city's right of way, so they wouldn't be able to do so regardless, or in the city parks, or in the plaza in downtown.
Last question. How can we as restaurant and bar owners help our community enter into phase 2?
Well, for me, this just goes back to those basic prevention messages. In order for us to be able to move to phase 2, we need to be doing everything we can as provided by the guidance into phase 1. Those are designed to help us reduce our cases, reduce the transmission, protect our hospital beds and things like that. So wear your mask, social distance, stay at home when you can, don't travel if you don't have to. All of those guidelines are there to help us reduce the spread of COVID, flatten that curve, and then be able to show that we're able to meet the benchmarks we need to move into phase 2, where we can begin to open our restaurants a little bit more, stay open a little bit longer, and do that in a safe way.
To add on to Susan's great recommendations, I think from the economic development perspective, the city of Woodburn is here to help support our business community. And if they are in need of services or they're not quite certain, please ask. Contact city staff, either Amanda, you, or Jesse, or myself, or Maricela, or John, and we'll do our best to connect you to the resources and to be conscientious of those around you to ensure that we're looking out for the betterment of our entire community.
And I think that the thing that people can do is they can look at the financial health of their business and really analyze their business and make plans to be in business in 6 months, to weather the storm. That's the best thing you can do for the community, because these restaurants and bars are great social outlets, and we don't want them to go away. And we want to be there to help. There's plenty of resources if you need that. The people can help you to manage your business and answer tough questions about that type of planning and analysis. And so it's there. There's people willing to help. And if it's not any one of us personally, we have resources that we can refer people to.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you guys for your time and for answering these questions. If any of you that are listening need further information, please reach out to the City of Woodburn and ask for the Economic Development Department, and we can point you into the right direction, whether that be with the chamber, with us, or pass you on to someone else. So thank you for your time.